Welcome back to this already the final segment of The Price of Business, and I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I got a series of interviews I'm doing over the next week or so, talking about the problem of communication in business today. Delighted to be able to spend some time with Patrick Malone. He's with a company called The PAR Group. That is the PAR, P-A-R Group.com. Patrick, that company's involved in interpersonal skills to enable you to lead, influence, and gain, and that's what you'll find over at the website. Welcome, Patrick, to the program.
Thank you for having me on, Kevin.
Glad to have you on. Tell us a little bit about your background before we get into our topic at hand.
Well, I'm a child of the 60s, and I don't remember a lot about the 60s, so people tell me that means I had a good time.
Yeah.
My background is in sales and sales management, and I joined the PAR Group in 1990. Because that was the aspect, the coaching other people was the aspect that I liked most about being a sales manager. And being a senior partner with the PAR Group allows me to do that exclusively. So it's more than a job. It's a avocation, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, very cool. And we talked a little bit, and I got this thing going on where I talk a lot with lots of business owners out there, and there's this weird phenomenon going on. Here we are in the the 21st century with more tools to communicate than any time in history. Yet the quality of communication seems to be dissipating rather quickly. And one big problem will be the situation where people will be engaged with potential clients, for example. And I get more and more stories of this, and all of a sudden, they're about to get a decision from that potential client about whether or not they're going to become a client, and then all of a sudden that client disappears. I mean, you're looking for them on the side of milk cartons, and you're going, what? What happened? And occasionally they'll come back a month later and say, oh, I'm sorry, this happened or that happened or whatever, and they still remain elusive about whether or not to do business. Are you seeing more of this?
Yeah, I see quite a bit of that, and it has. I think it's on the client's part, it's the fear that if they say no, if they tell the salesperson no, then they're going to get the hard sale. So I think some of that is hiding behind, voicemail and email and things like that. I think if the salespeople were more focused on getting a decision rather than simply trying to sell something, then the customer feels it's okay to say yes or no, make a well-informed decision, yes or no. And really, that's what salespeople ought to be doing. They're decision getters. And, the customer's the decision maker.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is that I just had a conversation with a PhD in psychology, and he says, one of the main reasons this is happening is an aversion to creating conflict. They don't want conflict. But in reality, aren't they creating more conflict by not being communicative? Even if it isn't direct conflict, they're creating conflict with that individual in a time in our history where, all of us are our neighbor. Even if one guy's in Chicago and the other guy's in Miami, everyone's each other's neighbor because of social media and that type of thing. It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, you would seem that would be the case, but I think from their perspective, they don't see the conflict because they're avoiding it.
Yeah, until someone says, yeah, I thought about doing business with your company, but then I hear that you don't respond very well, and communicate very well.
Well,
that's one of my values and priorities for doing business.
You're absolutely right. See, people will not change their behavior until the consequences of continuing are worse than changing it. Mm-hmm. Think about that for a minute. I mean, people say we resist change. We really don't resist change. We resist one of the two outcomes of change, and that is it'll work or it won't. So there's this fear that it won't work. Mm-hmm. And as long as the consequences of doing nothing have no real consequence to that individual, they will continue with their same behavior.
Talking again to Patrick Malone. He's with a company called the PAR Group. That's the PAR, P-A-R, group.com, pargroup.com. My producer wrote a note about procrastination. What's interesting, though, is in a lot of these stories, there's a lot of real engagement early on until the dating goes into a committed relationship stage. And that is where you see it disappearing. So do you think procrastination is as much of a role as other factors? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is, but I think that salespeople, by the way they communicate, can break down that barrier of procrastination. The more that they're asking for or identifying what are the next steps in this relationship and where do we go from here, you get a series of small commitments along the way. I think the procrastination comes when you haven't gotten those in advance, and then you go for the big commitment, the big enchilada all at one time.
Yeah, interesting. So what are some things that the person who's on the selling side can do to avoid the kind of conflict that seems to naturally happen as a result?
Well, the first thing they do is they set themselves up as the decision getter so that they're okay with hearing a well-informed yes or a well-informed no. And then they do a lot of questioning to understand from the client's perspective what they want, what they need, and then they're able to take what they've got, their product or service, and position it in such a way that it makes sense to the client. And by positioning, I'm talking about identifying the benefits that are important to the clients. There's a lot of benefits to any product or any service, but only a few of those are important to that specific client at this moment in time, and those are the only ones that should be raised. And then this idea of getting small commitments along the way until the big commitment is just natural.
So what do you do then? What are some things, we got about a minute left, what are some things that you can do to help expand the commitment on the part of the buyer?
I think you have to be respectful of the buyer and their role in the process. I think you have to respect their point of view. And I see one of the big problems is we have a real hard time respecting points of view that are different than our own.
Yeah,
and yet that's crucial in the interaction to build a relationship that establishes the trust to allow that commitment to take place.
All right, spend some good time with Patrick Malone. He's with a company called PAR, the PAR Group, rather, and you can look them up easily. The PAR Group, that's PAR group.com. And check them out. Great books, great content. It looks like a great consulting firm. Really feel enlightened after spending some time with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. So I want to encourage all of you to remember to check us out over there at priceofbusiness.com. I like to say it's a show that never ends. You can check it out over there at 24/7 at priceofbusiness.com. It's undergoing major changes, as well as our sister news website, usdailyreview.com. I was just looking at the changes and found it it's so exciting to see what's happening. Make sure you like them both at Facebook and Twitter, and we'll keep you updated on what's happening. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you spend it sensibly right here on this station.